I'm Abigail Carter, 37 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. By day, I'm the chief financial officer of a luxury event planning company. By night, I'm Ethan's wife, the college boyfriend I once believed was my forever. We have been together for 13 years, married for 8. There was a time I thought nothing could ever break the bond between us. But what if the love you thought was unbreakable was built on a lie you never saw coming? That morning, like any other, I got up earlier than Ethan. While brushing my teeth in the bathroom, I saw his iPhone light up on the sink. A message popped up from a name I didn't recognize. Can't wait for the weekend. The lodge, wine, and that red silk set. I'm counting the hours. I froze. Not because the message was bold, but because it was real. I stood there, toothbrush in hand, foam dissolving in my mouth, feet cold against the tile. Behind the frosted glass door, the shower hummed. But was Ethan really alone in there? I could hear water running down my husband's back as he showered, getting ready for work like it was any other day. And me? I couldn't take my eyes off the screen as it faded to black and unlocked the phone. I didn't need to. In that moment, what I felt wasn't shock. It was confirmation. I had suspected it for a while. Lately, Ethan had been pulling the last-minute business trip excuse, leaving me alone in the once cozy house on empty weekends. He'd started bringing his phone into the shower, something he never used to do. His laptop had a new password, and those eyes that once held my world now hid a secret that could destroy it. Those eyes that once looked at me with warmth now only glanced past me. Like I was a painting on the wall he'd long grown tired of. I used to tell myself, "Don't be paranoid, Abigail. Everyone gets tired after all these years. Who'd make a scene over a look?" But now, I just wanted to go back in time and tell myself, "Stop being stupid." I washed my face, dried my hands, and did my makeup like always. My hands didn't tremble. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, as if I had just stepped out of my own life and was watching it from the outside. When I walked out of the bathroom, I saw Ethan standing in front of the bedroom mirror, eyeing his tie. He glanced at me and smiled just like every other morning. But did he know I'd seen the message that could unravel his perfect facade? Maybe he hadn't realized that everything had changed the moment I read that message on his phone screen. "This weekend I have a client seminar in Salem," he said, adjusting his collar. "I'll be home late on Sunday." I nodded. "Don't forget to bring a thick coat. It gets cold at night there," I replied, my voice flat without emotion. I didn't ask about the message. I didn't ask who was counting the hours. I didn't want to interrupt the carefully scripted act he'd put so much effort into, because in my mind, something else had already begun to take shape, and I wouldn't say a single word until it was finished. What was I planning that Ethan would never see coming? Ethan always slept like a rock after his Wednesday night squash and 3 gins. I knew that as well as I knew his fingerprint unlocked, his right index finger. That night, once Ethan had passed out, the scent of gin and shampoo still hanging in the air, I quietly took his phone, gently tilted his hand onto the sensor. Click. The screen lit up. A chill crept down my spine, like the winter wind off the lake by the lodge where he once promised to build a deck for us. But what I found on that phone wasn't just a betrayal. It was a double life. The message about the red silk set was just the surface. What I found was an entire secret life he'd been living, one I had no idea about. Her name was Natalie Pierce, not some naive 20-something. Natalie was a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company, about 40 years old, living in Eugene. She had sharp wit, experience, and more importantly, she was married. His name came up in an older message. "Lucas will be in Boise all week. The lodge is all ours." Lucas Pierce, her husband. I quietly Googled him, typed in his name, and there it was, his LinkedIn profile. Lucas Pierce, 44 years old, high-end commercial architect specializing in eco-friendly spaces, with his own firm in Salem. His profile picture showed a tall man, dark stubble, and a tired but kind smile. But why did Lucas's smile feel like it hid a pain I was about to uncover? I didn't sleep that night. Each message felt like a blade slicing through old memories. Every time Ethan said he was going to a training in Salem, every night I sat alone reviewing files with only the dishwasher humming in the background. And then I found a photo of Ethan and Natalie at the lodge, wearing rings that weren't ours. The next morning, I sat in front of my computer writing and rewriting a message at least 12 times before finally sending it. Hi, Lucas. This is Abigail Carter. I believe my husband Ethan Carter and your wife Natalie Pierce are having an affair. If you're open to a conversation, I can share evidence. My number is 50398765543. My palms were soaked with sweat the moment I hit send. 2 hours later, my phone rang. His voice was deep and strangely calm, but there was a subtle tremor beneath it. Is this some kind of joke? I wish it were, I replied, my throat dry. I have texts, photos, and their weekend plans at the Silver Lake Lodge. A pause. What do you want to do? He asked after a long silence. I gripped the phone tighter, then spoke slowly. Would you want to meet them there with me before they uncork the wine or take off their coats? But what did Lucas know that he wasn't telling me yet? Lucas didn't answer right away, then finally a long breath. Okay, let's meet first. I want to see what you know. We agreed to meet Friday morning at a small cafe in Albany, halfway between Portland and Silver Lake. I arrived early, sitting in a corner booth facing the parking lot, and it took just one heartbeat to recognize Lucas when he walked in. Tall frame, navy blue coat, and a stride that carried the weight of winter behind it. He sat down without small talk. I placed my phone on the table, opened the message thread between Ethan and Natalie, and handed it to him. With every swipe of the screen, I saw his hand tighten. When he reached the photo Natalie had sent, her toes on the hardwood floor of the lodge, a floor he instantly recognized as his own design. He leaned back, eyes shut. I thought it was just work, just distance, he murmured. She never wanted to see a counselor, now I know why. But then Lucas leaned forward and whispered something that made my blood run cold. I found a hidden bank account in Natalie's name last month. $20,000, 0 cents, no explanation. After nearly an hour of conversation, Lucas said, I still have a spare key to the lodge. Natalie doesn't know I kept it. I nodded. Ethan thinks I'm on a business trip in Bend this weekend. He has no idea I'm anywhere near here. Then we'll get there first, he said, looking directly at me, but no yelling, no drama, just let them see us, and the truth. I tightened my grip on the coffee mug and nodded. The plan came together, from the shattered pieces inside both of us. The betrayed. No shouting, no chasing, just a presence timed perfectly, like a mirror held up to the lies they'd tried so hard to hide. But what else was Natalie hiding in that lodge? We agreed to meet again, Saturday morning at the lodge. They were scheduled to arrive at 6:00 p.m. By 9:00 a.m. Saturday, I was pulling up to the wooden lodge nestled among pine trees along Silver Lake. The air was cold, but there was no snow. Everything felt clearer in this crisp morning light. The truth, the pain, and the plan we were about to carry out. Lucas was already there. His gray car sat dusted with pollen near the steps. He was inside, holding a mug of hot coffee, eyes fixed on the still water of the lake. When I walked in, he nodded, a simple, familiar gesture, as if we weren't strangers bound by betrayal. Did you sleep? He asked, his voice low and soft. I'm not sure. Maybe I closed my eyes for a few hours, I replied, setting my bag down on the wooden chair. You? No, but I'm used to sleepless nights. Architects work best in silence. Then Lucas pulled out a small key from his pocket, not for the lodge, but for a locked drawer inside. We sat quietly for several minutes, not awkward, just two people quietly sorting through the wreckage inside. Then I spoke. The last time I was in this lodge was 4 years ago. Ethan and I came here after one of his long business trips. This is where I lost our first baby. Lucas looked over at me, his eyes softened. Natalie wanted kids too, but after 2 failed tests, she stopped bringing it up. I thought it was the grief. Turns out she had other distractions. And she's been sending money to someone I don't know, Lucas added, his voice tight. We didn't cry. There was only the steady hum of the electric heater and a wind brushing past the trees. Do you think we're going too far? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, Lucas said. If this were revenge, maybe, but this is about bringing them face to face with reality. I nodded like an unexpected group therapy session. We started setting up the space, not as a trap, but as a staging of truth. I wiped down the long wooden table in the living room where Natalie and Ethan often sat planning their so-called work weekends. Lucas brought in a bottle of white wine from his car, Natalie's favorite. I set out 4 crystal glasses, the kind Ethan always packed as part of his arrogant, refined taste ritual. We arranged 2 chairs facing away from the front door, so they'd have no choice but to face us as they entered. The lights were adjusted in madly warm amber, not too bright to provoke tension, but clear enough to catch every facial expression. Then I found a hidden note under the table, in Ethan's handwriting. Meet me at midnight, N. How do you think they'll react? I asked as we sat down, scanning the room like we'd just finished staging a play. Lucas shook his head. Natalie will cry. Ethan, I'm not sure. Maybe anger, maybe begging. But I guarantee he's not ready for the fact that both of us know everything. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about ourselves. Not just as the betrayed, but as people stripped down behind the armor that heartbreak had forced us to wear. I told Lucas about all the times Ethan skipped family gatherings, claiming client emergencies, about the Uber receipts I'd seen that originated from a residential neighborhood 50 minutes away from his office, and how I'd once convinced myself he'd just stopped at a bar with friends. Lucas shared how he once caught Natalie smiling to herself while texting, only to snap her phone shut the moment he walked in. I knew something was off, he said, but I chose to trust her until you messaged me. Then Lucas revealed he'd hired a private investigator weeks ago, and the report was in his car. Outside, the sky turned gray. The clock read 3:45 p.m. Less than 2 hours, I said, adjusting the last glass. Are you scared? Lucas asked. I'm not afraid of the truth, I replied. I'm only afraid I might forgive the unforgivable. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. I'll remember that. We stepped out onto the porch, standing together as the stillness of the lake made time feel like it had stopped. But then we heard a car engine in the distance. Hours too early. 5:55 p.m. The air inside the lodge was tight, strung like a wire, ready to snap. Lucas and I sat silently in the living room, facing the entrance. 2 wine glasses rested on the table beside the bottle of white Natalie once called the only thing that makes a weekend feel special. On the armchair across from us sat a thick envelope filled with everything we needed: messages, screenshots, credit card statements, and a voice recording of Ethan's assistant, casually confirming Ethan doesn't have any meeting in Salem, and Lucas's investigator report, detailing Natalie's secret meetings with a 3rd person. We heard the crunch of tires on gravel in the distance. Lucas looked at me. I said nothing. Just nodded. A black SUV pulled up to the steps. Ethan stepped out first, leather jacket on, holding a suitcase and a gift bag. Natalie followed, carrying a bouquet of white roses. They were laughing, carefree, as if arriving at some kind of honeymoon retreat. The door opened. Natalie entered first, her smile freezing instantly. Ethan bumped into her back, then looked up, just in time for our eyes to meet. But someone else stepped out of the SUV, a man neither of us recognized. Ethan dropped the gift bag. Inside was a bottle of champagne. It rolled across the hardwood floor and shattered. The strong smell of alcohol filled the room. Natalie's mouth fell open. The flowers slipped from her hands. The petals scattered wildly like a visual metaphor of what had just happened, an illusion blown apart. "Welcome to your weekend getaway," I said, my voice light as a breeze. "We've prepared wine, chairs, and the truth." Ethan stood frozen, lips tightly pressed. Natalie stepped back half a pace, her eyes darting to Lucas for help. "Abigail, It's not what you think," Ethan began. "It's not." I tilted my head. "Then what about the texts about the lodge, the wine receipts, and the Uber confirmation to her neighborhood? Are those not what I think either?" Lucas stood. "And what about me, Natalie? You said you were going to a seminar with a female coworker. You even texted, 'Good night, miss you,' before turning off your phone. Was I imagining that too?" The stranger outside knocked on the door, holding a briefcase. Natalie broke down, covering her face. "Lucas, please don't." "No," he said, his voice steely. "Don't what? Don't stand here and face you. Don't hear the truth. Don't watch my wife cheating in the very house I designed with my own hands." I stood and took the envelope from the chair beside me, placing it on the table. "I didn't come here empty-handed," I said, my voice steady. "I spent the last 48 hours gathering everything, call history, messages, photos from the company gala Natalie and Ethan both attended. The one Ethan told me was just with the guys." And then I pulled out the note I'd found under the table, holding it up for Ethan to see. Natalie turned pale. Ethan grabbed the envelope, flipped through a few pages, then threw it down after only seconds, his eyes bloodshot. "You were spying on me?" I looked at him directly. "I was verifying the truth because I'd been suspicious for too long and because you were so careful. I had to be." Natalie collapsed into a chair, hair disheveled, tears running down her cheeks. Lucas didn't move toward her. He turned away, staring out the window like he needed air. "Natalie, how long?" he asked, still not looking at her. 9 months, she whispered. But then the stranger walked in saying, "I need to speak to Natalie, now." I felt a tight knot in my chest. Ethan clenched his hands, stepping toward me as if to explain. "Abigail, I was wrong, but that doesn't mean I stopped loving you." I stepped back. "If the love you're talking about is the kind that brings another woman to the same place where I lost our child, then you can keep it." The room fell into silence. I looked at Ethan one last time. "You can choose to leave now or sit and hear this through. But if you think there's any chance for forgiveness, then you've completely misunderstood who I am." Lucas looked at Natalie, then turned to me. "I need some air," I nodded. "So do I." But as we stepped outside, we saw the stranger open his briefcase, revealing documents labeled Pierce Divorce. We stepped out onto the porch, leaving behind 2 people breaking apart in the ruins of their lies. Outside, Silver Lake was still calm like it had been that morning, but for me, the wind had started to rise. We returned to the living room in silence. Natalie and Ethan were still seated, neither looking at the other. The stranger was gone, but his briefcase sat open on the table. The air was thick, heavy with things left unsaid. I pulled a chair across from Ethan. Lucas sat beside me, staring straight at Natalie. No one spoke. Not until I placed the second folder on the table did the atmosphere begin to shift. And then I revealed a recorded voicemail Ethan left for Natalie, confessing he'd planned to leave me after the weekend. "Ethan," I said, eyes fixed on him, "have you ever told Natalie why we've kept separate finances for the past 8 years?" He stiffened. "Abigail, I'll tell her." I cut him off. "Natalie, maybe you didn't know, but Ethan once racked up over $55,000, 0 cents in gambling debt back in 2017. His parents quietly paid it off to avoid damaging his career. After that, I had to keep separate accounts, not because of distrust, but because I saw firsthand how much he could hide." Natalie turned to Ethan, stunned. "You never told me that." "Because it has nothing to do with what's happening today," Ethan snapped. "Doesn't it?" I tilted my head, eyes locked on him. You cheated on me and tried to justify it by saying I was too busy, too cold. But you forgot to tell your mistress that I've been the one carrying the financial load, paying this lodge's mortgage every month, while you were lying and playing cards with your old friends in Eugene." Ethan lowered his head, saying nothing. Lucas now turned to Natalie. "And you told me the bank delayed the roof repair loan, but the truth is, you transferred nearly $12,000 to a rehab center in Bend. The recipient, Connor Pierce, that's your brother, right? And you've been meeting someone else," Lucas added, holding up the investigator's report. Natalie looked overwhelmed, her face pale. "I didn't want you to worry, no," Lucas said, voice steady but cold. "You didn't want to share the truth. You've been living two lives. One with me, one with Ethan, and the worst part is both were built on secrets." The room fell silent. I nodded slightly, then said, "This is the only thing you two have in common. You've never been honest with either of us, and even with each other. It's just polished versions of yourselves." Natalie burst into tears. "I never meant for it to go this far, but you let it," I replied. "I don't know what hurts more, being betrayed or realizing the person who betrayed you doesn't even have the courage to admit they were wrong." Ethan looked at me, eyes red. "I'm sorry, Abigail. Truly sorry." I looked back at him and said calmly, "Sorry doesn't change the truth. And love, if it ever existed, can't save a marriage that's rotted from the roots." Lucas stood up, no longer angry, just exhausted. "Natalie," he said, "do you know what hurts the most? It's that you're never worthy of being trusted with what you are carrying." Natalie said nothing, her face drenched in tears. I stood as well. I didn't come here to get love back. I came to reclaim the truth. And the truth is, Ethan, you don't love me. You love the validation of being admired. Natalie, you don't love Lucas. You love the feeling of escaping a life you didn't have the courage to face. I looked at both of them one last time, then said slowly, "Love isn't enough. Trust, respect, and honesty are the foundation of any real relationship. Without those, love is just a beautiful illusion." Just then, Natalie's phone buzzed with a message from the stranger. "We need to talk about the money." Just as I finished, Natalie suddenly stood, her hand gripping the edge of the chair. Her eyes were red, not just with shame, but something else, a mix of fear and confusion. "There's something I haven't said," she said, voice shaking. Lucas turned to her, brow furrowed again. Natalie swallowed hard, her eyes briefly flicking to Ethan, then landing on me. I am pregnant." The living room went completely still. The ticking of the wooden wall clock echoed loudly, each second slicing through the air. Ethan jumped up. What did you say?" Natalie nodded, lips trembling. "I know it's not the right time, but I found out just last week. I was going to tell Ethan this weekend at the lodge, but—" Lucas stood frozen, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is the baby mine?" Natalie turned to him, eyes glistening. "Yes, I'm sure. Ethan and I always used protection." But then Ethan shouted, "That's not true! You told me you stopped taking the pill!" I went numb. For a few seconds my mind went blank, then quickly flooded with a storm of emotion. No one had prepared for this. No one expected that a confrontation would be overturned by the arrival of an unborn life. Ethan stared at Natalie wide-eyed. "You're saying you're pregnant with his child?" "Don't call it his," Natalie snapped, showing the first hint of composure since she entered. "I was wrong to cheat, but at least I never lied to you about how I felt." Lucas turned away, fists clenched. I looked at Ethan. He couldn't speak. His furious expression shifted to something unrecognizable. Shock, humiliation, or just complete emptiness. I took a deep breath and stood. "Looks like we've all had enough for today," I said, my eyes still locked on Ethan. "And since everything is out in the open, I won't drag this out." I opened my bag and pulled out a small folder, placing it on the table next to him. This is the divorce petition and all the financial documentation I've prepared. I've transferred our joint assets into a separate account, legally. Everything's been verified by my attorney. I have nothing to hide. And then I slid a photo across the table. Ethan and Natalie at a casino dated last week. Ethan still didn't respond. You can review it or refuse to sign it right now, but I'm not changing my decision. Natalie sat back down, instinctively holding her stomach. Lucas turned to her, voice low but controlled. I'll need time to process all of this, but if you're keeping the baby, I'll take responsibility. The child isn't at fault. Natalie nodded, choking back tears. I know, and thank you for still being able to say that. I looked at them both, then turned to Ethan. I don't know if you still have something to say, but if you do, now's the time. He raised his head, eyes red and weary. Abigail, all of this. It's not worth ending everything over. We had so many good things. You're right, I nodded. We had so many good things. But the fact that you chose to trade it all away for some vague emotional thrill with someone who's not even honest with her own husband means I have to protect the rest of my life. Lucas stood, polite but firm. I'll head to the car. Abigail, if you need anything after this, call me. I think we still have a few conversations left to finish. I nodded, grateful for his calm presence. Natalie stepped toward me, hesitant. I know I have no right to apologize, but I truly never thought it would go this far. I looked directly at her, my eyes no longer angry, just clear. The most dangerous people aren't the obviously bad ones. They're the ones who keep telling themselves they're good, even while they're lying. Then I noticed a ring on Natalie's finger. Not Lucas's, not Ethan's, but new. She froze for a moment, then turned away. I picked up the folder, pulled a pen from my coat pocket, and signed the bottom left corner of each page. When I put the pen down, I felt lighter than I had in years. Lighter because I no longer had to hold together a marriage that had already rotted. Lighter because I no longer had to pretend to trust someone who didn't deserve it. I looked up at Ethan, the man who had once been my entire youth, the dream of a family I used to believe in. Good luck, I said. You're going to need more than that. As I turned to leave, Ethan grabbed my wrist, whispering, There's something you don't know about Natalie. Lucas and I left the lodge around 8:30 p.m. Inside, Ethan sat motionless in his chair, and Natalie curled in the corner of the room, holding her stomach like the only thing left to cling to was the life she had just admitted was growing inside her. No one saw us out. No one needed to. We walked in silence, the crunch of dried leaves underfoot reminding us that a chapter had officially closed. Lucas opened the car door for me, then got into the driver's seat. Before starting the engine, he glanced over and asked softly, Do you want to eat something? I know a little place in downtown Silver Lake that stays open late. Nothing fancy, but their tomato soup's pretty decent. I laughed. Hoarse, unexpected laugh, but a real one. Yeah, let's eat. I'm starving. We sat side by side in a small diner, the warm yellow light casting a gentle glow over the old wooden table. Neither of us tried to analyze what had just happened. Instead, we talked about quieter things, like how Lucas once considered quitting architecture to open a craft brewery, or how I had dreamed of opening a bakery cafe in Ashland but let it go after Ethan called the idea unrealistic. But then Lucas handed me a USB drive, saying this has everything the investigator found. You'll want to see it. After dinner, we said goodbye with a light handshake and a silent nod. We didn't become lovers, but that night I knew I had gained something even more grounding. A friend. Someone who had walked with me through the darkest night. 8 months later, I stood on the balcony of my small beach house in Cannon Beach, holding a cup of hot tea, watching the waves crash against the shore. The divorce had been finalized in less than 3 months, thanks to my meticulous preparation, documents, evidence, and clearly defined assets. Ethan didn't fight it, Maybe because he knew the longer it dragged out, the more he stood to lose. I received the majority of the assets, including a one-time buyout for the old lodge, which I later sold back to Ethan. I didn't need to keep a place filled with ghosts, but the USB drive revealed Natalie had been funneling money to a man named Victor, the stranger at the lodge. Ethan lost his promotion opportunity at the financial firm. His boss, Eleanor, a strict but fair woman, found out about what happened through an internal company event. No one said anything officially, but gradually he was removed from big projects from the next executive director. He became the guy overseeing Team C temporarily. Natalie gave birth last month. Lucas texted me, "Baby's here, healthy, a girl. Emotions are all over the place, but we're trying," attached with a photo. A tiny hand wrapped around Natalie's finger, and Lucas looking into the camera with a softness I'd never seen before. I don't know if they got back together as a couple, but clearly they're learning how to be honest with themselves and each other, even if late. But Victor had contacted Lucas, claiming Natalie owed him $50,000, 0 cents, for services rendered. As for me, I live alone, in a new house by the sea. It's not far from Portland, but peaceful enough that I can hear the wind every morning. I changed jobs. No longer a CFO, but a freelance financial advisor working on my own schedule. No more packed meetings, no more midnight email chains. I've also learned how to unplug, how to rest, how to breathe. Lucas and I still keep in touch. Not often, but consistently. Sometimes it's a quick Happy New Year. Sometimes it's just, "Saw a little coastal cabin in Ya Huts, made me think of you, beautiful." And sometimes it's a 10-minute call just to ask, "Are you doing okay?" I don't need anything more. We walked through one of the longest nights of our lives together. And even though neither of us says it, I know we're friends. A kind of friendship that needs no labels, just a look to understand each other. But last week, I got an anonymous letter with a photo of Ethan and Victor together. That evening, I sat on the front porch holding my favorite book with a small music player beside me, softly playing a Beethoven symphony. I didn't think about Ethan anymore. No more pain, no more regret. Only a quiet peace like the autumn sea. I had survived what once felt impossible, and, most importantly, I had found myself again. One early morning in April, just as the sun rose over the distant pine trees, I woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm clock, not for a meeting or a packed schedule, simply because I wanted to enjoy the early moment of the day that I had missed for years. The light streamed through the glass windows, spilling across the living room of my small home on the bay in Cannon Beach. The space was bathed in a soft golden hue, reflecting off the teacup in my hand, making everything feel strangely clear. I sat down in my familiar armchair, draped a light knit blanket over my legs, and gazed out at the sea, gently lapping in the distance. My heart no longer felt heavy, and most importantly, I no longer felt like the woman left behind. I had divorced and started a new life, but the letter hinted at a secret Ethan and Victor were planning. Something about the law. Ethan had once been a significant part of my world, but he wasn't the destination. He came into my life to teach me an expensive lesson, to wake me up, and help me realize that trust should never be given to someone who doesn't know how to protect it. Love doesn't last when honesty is missing, and blind sacrifice only makes us forget our own worth. For years I tried to be a good wife, successful at work, gentle in conversations, forgiving of flaws. But what did I get in return? A marriage filled with betrayal. A husband who no longer looked at me like a partner, but like someone planning his escape without being caught. Did it hurt? Of course. But the pain no longer drowned me. It had brought me back to shore. I had found myself more than ever before. I was no longer the woman sitting alone in the car silently crying after realizing her husband changed his password. No longer blaming herself. Maybe I wasn't soft enough when he avoided holding her at night. no longer clutching a coffee mug each morning just to hear his words while feeling completely numb inside. I am steady now, clear, alert, and strong enough to walk away from anyone who no longer deserves a place in my life. But what was Victor's role in all this? And why was Ethan still involved? I remember the last time I saw Ethan. It was at a financial charity event in Portland. He stood across the room with a glass of wine, watching me from a distance. He looked different, thinner, quieter. As I walked past him, he softly called, "Abigail." I turned. "Hello, you look well," he said, hesitating. "I am well," I nodded. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I smiled. "I know, but you don't have to say it, because that's the past, and I've chosen to live in the present." He nodded and stepped back. For the first time, I saw him as small. But his eyes darted nervously, as if he knew Victor was watching. Every morning in my new home, I open all the windows to let the sunlight in. I keep pots of rosemary along the porch and grow herbs just outside the kitchen. I started picking up what I once abandoned, an unfinished manuscript, a few pages of journaling, a letter to my 27-year-old self, naive but full of dreams. I began offering financial counseling for divorced women, not as a cold expert spouting numbers, but as someone who has lived it, who understands the fear and loss that come with starting over. They trust me, and I know why, because I don't just speak with reason, but with a heart that's been broken and carefully rebuilt. Lucas still keeps in touch. These days he's busy with his baby, but once in a while he sends a message. "Lila rolled over today. Her smile looks just like Natalie's. I'm happy for them, not because they erased the pain, but because they learned how to face it and heal together. As for me, I'm not looking for new love. I'm not rushing into a relationship just to fill a void. I'm learning to love myself first, something I had forgotten for years. But I've hired my own investigator now, to uncover what Ethan and Victor are hiding." One weekend afternoon, I drove along the coastal road playing an old playlist Ethan used to call Too Sentimental. The music filled the car, Shake It Out by Florence Welch. I smiled as the wind swept through my hair. Not because the past had disappeared, but because I'd gone far enough from it to look back without hurting. I used to think losing someone you love was the end, but it's not. It's just the end of something that no longer served you, so you can begin something better. And if someone were to ask me now, "Abigail, do you regret anything?" I would answer without hesitation, I don't. Because some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us how to leave at the right time. My story isn't a tragedy, it's a journey of rebirth. From a betrayed wife, I've learned to stand back up, to heal, and to love myself again. I no longer resent the past nor seek revenge. Instead, I choose peace and a life I own. Every morning in my new home is a reminder. Sometimes loss clears the way for something better, and I'm grateful I had the courage to walk away when it mattered most. But as I parked my car, my investigator called, "Abigail, Victor's not who you think. He's connected to Ethan's gambling debts." What do you think of Abigail's journey? If it were you, would you forgive or walk away like she did? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about love, family, and rebirth.